Alright, so today is the last lesson for Unit 3, Part 1, where we're going to talk about how to solve using quadratic formula. But before we talk about quadratic formula, we have to talk about a piece of that quadratic formula, which is known as the discriminant. The discriminant tells us something that's actually kind of important. So when do you use the discriminant? You use the discriminant when you are just wanting to know how many solutions you have. And more importantly, how many real solutions you have. Because we are eventually going to get into the imaginary, not real solutions. So we're not going to do that today. We're just going to talk about how many solutions you have. Because remember, the solutions are when it crosses the x-axis through your x-intercepts. So you could have one, you could have two, which we found when we were factoring, or you could have none. You could have no real solution. So the discriminant is this, b squared minus 4ac. So we know how to find a, it's the number in front of the x squared. We know how to find b, it's the number in front of the x. And this c is the one that's by itself. So the a, b, and c, identifying a, b, and c, there's nothing new about that with this. So let's talk about when you have a no solution, two solutions, or one real solution. So if your discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, if that is greater than 0, you have two real solutions. If your discriminant is less than 0, you have no real solutions. What you have is imaginary, but we're not going there yet. And if you have b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, you just have one real solution. So all you have is the x-intercept, and that's the high or the low point. Okay, so I have 4 examples to look at. I have x squared minus 10x minus 11 is equal to 0. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify your a, your b, and your c. Same thing we've always done. So on this one, my a is 1, my b is negative 10, my c is negative 11. You do b squared, so negative 10 squared, minus 4 times a times c. And you're going to put that just like that in your calculator. I'm going to pull my calculator up over here. So I have negative 10, that's going to be in parentheses. You're going to square it. Now on your calculators, you have two options. You can do the little caret, looks like an upside down triangle. Caret, we call that a caret. Caret 2, or you can pick the squared button with the x squared button, either one. And then minus 4, parenthesis 1, parenthesis negative 11, and press enter. We find that our discriminant is 144. That means we have two real solutions. It's that easy. I don't want to know what the solutions are. Discriminant is not going to tell me what the solutions are. It's just going to tell me how many there are. So example 2. I have 2x squared plus 6x is equal to 7. Same thing with finding discriminant and finding quadratic formula, or solving using quadratic formula. It has to equal 0. So I cannot define my a, my b, and my c here because it does not equal 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move that 7 over. So I'm going to have 2x squared plus 6x minus 7 is equal to 0. Now I can identify my a, my b, and my c. So my a is 2, my b is 6, and my c is negative 7. b squared minus 4ac, so 6 squared minus 4, parenthesis 2, parenthesis negative 7, using that good old calculator. So 6 squared minus 4 times 2, and then parenthesis negative 7, I get that my discriminant is 92, which is greater than 0, meaning I have two real solutions. That's it. Really easy. Really easy. But again, it's not telling me what my solutions are, it's just telling me how many of them that I have. Again, example 3, it does not equal 0, so I need to move that 10 over. It is a negative 10, so you're going to end up adding the 10 to both sides. So you have x squared minus 6x plus 10 is equal to 0. Identify your a, your b, and your c. So my a is 1, my b is negative 6, my c is 10. Using the formula, b squared minus 4ac. Plugging it into my calculator, negative 6 squared. Again, either the caret 2 or the squared button, minus 4, parenthesis 1, parenthesis 10. And I get that my discriminant is negative 4. This is a case where my discriminant is less than 0, meaning I have no real solutions. What I have are imaginary solutions. We'll get there eventually this year, but we're not there yet. Okay, so I have no real solutions. Example 4, my a is equal to 1, and I can say that because it equals 0. My A is equal to 1, my B is equal to 6, and my C is equal to 9. So plugging all of that into the calculator, negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9, and I get that that is equal to 0. If my discriminant is equal to 0, I have one real solution. And that's discriminant. Really easy. Telling you how many solutions you have. That's all a discriminant's going to tell you. It doesn't tell you what the solutions are. It just tells you how many you have. Quadratic formula, however, will give you solutions. And what's really nice about the quadratic formula is it will always work. It will always work. Not everything is factorable. We haven't really gotten into those yet because we've been teaching you factoring. So not everything is factorable. There are some cases where it is just not going to factor. I always try to factor first because I like factoring. I think factoring is pretty easy. But quadratic formula will work all the time. And there's nothing really that difficult about this. There's just a lot to plug into the calculator. So you can use this anytime. Anytime you can use quadratic formula. And you don't have to memorize the quadratic formula. We are going to give it to you. Okay, so you definitely want to use the quadratic formula when factoring fails, most definitely. And the other thing to remember is you can only use quadratic formula if the quadratic equals 0. So before you, because you're using A, B, and C again, before you can identify A, B, and C, it needs to equal 0. So looking at this first example, I have 2x squared plus 8x plus 1. It definitely equals 0, so I can first thing, identify A, B, and C. And then you're going to use that formula. Now, I say on this formula that this is opposite of B plus or minus, we are going to do both, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. That should look familiar. B squared minus 4AC is your discriminant, all over 2A. I do not say that that is negative B. I say that that is opposite B. If I say it's negative B, what are you going to do if it's negative already? But if you say opposite B and it's negative, you'll know to plug in a positive, okay? And you are going to do a plus and a minus. Now, we as math people, we get kind of lazy, and so we just make it into one equation until we have to split it. So plugging it into the equation, opposite of B, my B was 8, so I went opposite. So negative 8 plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. So again, that's my discriminant, B squared, 8 squared, minus 4 times A times C. So 4 times 2 times 1, all over 2A. Now, how do you start this in your calculator? You start with what we've been practicing. You start with the discriminant. You cannot put these all into your calculator in one swipe, not with these calculators that we use. So I'm going to do my discriminant first. So my discriminant is 8 squared minus 4 times 2 times 1. So my discriminant is 56. So I have negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 56 all over, and you know that 2 times 2 is 4. Now, then I try to put that discriminant in the calculator, the square root of 56. I get a decimal. That's where we are stopping right now. That is still two solutions. Your discriminant is greater than 0. So it has 2 solutions. It has 2 real solutions, and you have both of them there. You have negative 8 plus the square root of 56, which is 7 and some change divided by 4, and you have negative 8 minus 7 and some change divided by 4. You do still have 2 real solutions. They're just not pretty. So that's as pretty as we can leave it, and that's as pretty as right now we're going to leave it. So again, this is me just showing you that you do still have 2 solutions. You have negative 8 plus the square root of 56 over 4, and you have negative 8 minus the square root of 56 over 4. If you want to write them as single one big chunk like that, I'm fine with that, or if you want to split them, that's great too. Example 2 doesn't equal 0. I can't identify A, B, and C yet. So I am first going to add 1 to both sides to make that other side equal 0. So I have 5x squared plus 4x plus 1 is equal to 0. So my A is equal to negative 5, my B is equal to 4, and my C is equal to 1. Now I'm going to do opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Okay, so again, it's just plugging in. plugging into the formula. And you don't even have to memorize that formula. We are going to always give you that formula. So I put the discriminant part into my calculator. So 4 squared minus 4, parenthesis, negative 5, close it, open it, 1, I get the square root of 36. Or sorry, I get 36. Putting that underneath the radical. Then I go into my calculator and I get the square root of 36. Square root of 36 is 6. So I can't just leave it. So now I make 2 separate equations. You can either make them out to the right, or I actually usually put them on down below. I started on the right and then I ended up writing them down below. So I have negative 4 plus 6 over 10, negative 10, and I have negative 4 minus 6 divided by negative 10. Because remember, you are doing both. And so now I'm going to use my calculator. Negative 4 plus 6 is 2. Dividing that by negative 10, I get that is 0.2. I don't want decimals, I want fractions. So that is negative 1/5. So x is equal to negative 1/5 is one of my solutions. And then the other one, negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. And negative 10 divided by negative 10 is 1. So my other real solution is 1. So if your discriminant gives you a number, you should check it in your calculator and see if it works. If it works, you have to split it. If it doesn't work, you can leave it as this, like we had in example 1, square root of 56. We haven't taught you how to simplify radicals yet, so you can just leave it like that. Okay. Last example, example 3. X squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 0. Yay, equals 0. I know that A is equal to 1, B is equal to negative 2, and C is equal to 3. So opposite of B, here's where it comes really into play. Opposite of B, my B was negative 2, so I'm going opposite of B, which means that the value of B that I put into the formula is a positive 2. Plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. So I'm going to put negative 2 squared minus 4, parenthesis 1, parenthesis 3, and I get that that's negative 8. Now remember, that's my discriminant. So what happens if your discriminant is a negative number? You're done. You have no real solutions. So you could, for us today, you can leave it at that. You can write that that is no real solutions, and I'm happy with that. Now, you could go further in months from now when we'll start talking about imaginary numbers. But for me today, that's as far as we were going to get. And that is solving using quadratic formula and also talking about using the discriminant to find out how many solutions you have.